Did you think Hadrian's Wall was light? Well, we've got news for you. They've upped the ante. I'm kidding, of course, that wasn't light, but this is even weightier, I think. This is the Anarchy. This is their spiritual successor to that game, and it's going to look very, very similar. We're going to spend a lot of this video mostly focusing on what we see some of the big differences are, how they've kind of ratcheted some things up and tweaked some of what you're doing in this type of game. If you're looking for a how to play, this is not going to be that. If you want a how to play, go to Meeple University. They have a great, thorough how to play on how to play the Anarchy. We, of course, will touch on what you're doing in the game, but mostly we wanted to talk about, if you're familiar with Hadrian's Wall, how this differs.
Yeah, this is a spiritual successor to Hadrian's Wall, so a lot of the mechanics of what you're doing during each turn will feel very familiar.
Yeah.
Of course, there are some new elements added into the game. Of course, it's a new theme. The Anarchy, which was a real time period, it was a civil war in England, so there's a lot more centered around castle defense.
Yeah.
In this game, which Hadrian's Wall, you could get attacked on the wall. This is actually giving you like a full 3D castle that you're building, which is, for me, one of the most satisfying new elements I think they added into the formula here.
Yeah, we theorized it would be when we first saw pictures of the game, and you can see the castles right here. In fact, we've got the whole game as much as we can on the top-down camera in front of us. Of course, you've got your two giant sheets full of things. We will put up some pictures of that so you can see it a little bit better. But yes, we have our castles here, and this is a very tactile aspect of building that defense. In Hadrian's Wall, you're kind of just building that defense across the top of one of your sheets. In this one, you're going to be building it literally with walls, towers, gates, moats, even putting people around it to help defend against the attack.
Yeah.
And the attack itself is going to be, in the vein of Hadrian's Wall, kind of a multi-step process where you're like, okay, here's the first attack, here's the next. Those are going to be represented by these cards that are above your player board. Each round, in the first one, you're going to have two. We're kind of got a game set up in progress. This is going to be our next round where we're going to have to defend each of these attacks, some of which you know, some of which you don't.
Yeah, this is a really interesting new addition, and we'll probably spend a little bit more time talking about this because this is probably the biggest difference from what you have in Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah.
This really feels like a military simulation. You have a castle that's under siege, and you're dealing these cards out. Some of them, like David said, are face up, and some of them are face down based on which slot they're in. But even the face down ones give you a little bit of information. And what each one of these cards is showing you, it's how your castle is being sieged. Are they attacking from a particular direction? Are they attacking the walls, the towers, the gate? Are they coming in from the moat? And in really medieval fashion, something I always love about these games is you do feel like you're learning a little bit. You actually have a series of different tactics, things that they use to defend their castles, covers and throwing rocks and hot oil and dropping logs and shooting bolts down. Each one of these cards is susceptible to a specific type of defense. So all of this is kind of set up at the beginning of the round, so you can kind of plan ahead for what's coming. And most of what you're doing on these sheets is really to prepare for that oncoming onslaught.
Yeah, much like Hadrian's Wall, there are going to be some tracks down here that are effectively where most of your score is going to come from at the end of the game. But while doing that, that defending of the attacks is far more front and center to this game and incredibly more thinky than Hadrian's Wall, because the strategy that you feel when you're planning during the entire round, you're like, okay, I'm going to need this here to defend these walls. I've got this one here that does the gate. This one does the moat. You can't build all of that.
Right.
So you're going to have to pick and choose some of your battles, and you're going to be able to put some people out there too. You've got mercenaries and knights and different people that aren't generally spent a ton. The knights aren't spent at all, right? On your sheets.
Well, knights are really just for combat, but yeah, you have to kind of decide a lot of different things because you are defending your castle, but it wouldn't be a civil war if you weren't also attacking other players, which is not at the table, but people out in the world are simulated by these different castles here. And again, so you don't only have your tactics to defend and you have your castle, you also have this whole new section of the player board that allows you to build different siege engines yourself, which are then required to come out here and conquer these different castles. If you manage to do that, you get some of the bravery, which is one of those victory points, and a variety of resources. Also, if you don't come out here and fight at least a little bit, you might start earning discontent later on in the game, which can be pretty bad too. So you do need to kind of split your guys up. Do I want to send them to attack? Do I want to use them to defend? Do I want to use my resources to build siege engines? Or do I want to use them to build defensive? So it really does kind of feel like you're in the middle of this war as you're playing the game.
Yeah, and the game itself gives you as much as Hadrian Wall gave you and more. Like Ryan just said, this is something you can do during your turn. So as everyone's simultaneously spending all the resources to do things, you can once, during a round, go out here and try to attack the next castle. And if I didn't one round and I'm sort of stuck back here, that castle that was in the first round, I can't attack anymore, but I can go to the next castle after that, or whatever one is the current castle for the round. But the castles before it, that maybe other players at the table defeated, are going to contribute to the defensive value of that next castle for me. So it's going to be maybe a little harder to gear up for that, but you might need the time in the first couple rounds to sort of like build up your forces, or at least build up your engine so that you have the knights and the mercenaries to contribute to that.
Yeah, you're going to have to, because there's no way, like David said, there's no way you're building your castle up enough over the course of this game. And again, you're doing all of these things by taking different actions on your player board in similar fashion to Hadrian's Wall. You're spending the resources, checking off a box, and the box might say to level up your tower or your wall, so your wall goes to the next level, or build a tower. Now, the one really positive thing here is that these pieces can never be destroyed. If you lose a combat, you gain some discontent, which is negative victory points, but you don't lose pieces of your castle, so you don't have to ever start over. Because the game can be punishing, so that's, I think, one area where they actually give you a little bit of leeway that you can continuously build up. So if you do really bad one round, you can really focus on building up your castle the next round and maybe do a little bit better.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with Hadrian's Wall, just to give you a quick overview, in this game, you're going to be flipping a card. Like in Hadrian's Wall, you got 2 cards and you chose one to put on your board and one to get for resources. In this one, right from the jump, it starts out a little bit differently. There's 2 cards per player from a main deck that are put out.
Yeah.
And then we all draft those. So I'm going to get one at a time, which is already a far more interesting way of doing it. You're not pulling it from your own deck. And these cards are going to have scoring at the bottom and resources at the top. The one you tuck under your board is going to be a scoring thing for you. The resources at the top are the resources you're going to take, plus whatever you're producing.
And there's a lot more production.
There's a lot more production. And on your turn, you're spending all of those things. And it's one of my favorite things about Hadrian's Wall. And it should be said, this is sponsored content, but we love Hadrian's Wall. And this is effectively more and more in-depth Hadrian's Wall. But you spend all those resources and you're literally putting those tokens out, you're marking stuff on your sheet. Oh, I marked off another resource, I get that resource back. So your hands are constantly going back and forth between these resources and your play area. And then you're effectively going to be done when you don't have any more resources to spend. In this one, though, you will have some of those knights and maybe some of the red workers or the guildsmen. And you can then put those out in this area in addition to the walls and the towers that you've built to try to defend against those cards. So that makes it even feel more strategic in that you're building it up during your turn, but then right before the fight, you're able to go, okay, where can I assign these guys?
Yeah.
And that's where some of the face down cards, you're like, I'm not even sure where they're going to come from on that one. But side note, you can actually get spies so you can peek at those cards as well.
Yeah, I think that's really cool how they've built on what you experienced with Hadrian's Wall. And one thing that they've kept from Hadrian's Wall that I know you are a big fan of is because there's actually physical resources at the table. You're taking all different colors of workers, you're taking food, silver, and wood, and bringing them up, to your play area. You don't need to ever remember where you were, because it's not like, okay, well, this thing gives me wood, I have to spend it immediately. No, you actually get the wood, and then you remember you have that wood, and you can spend that wood later. And there's generally always something to spend on. Even the wood can just be built to build tactics, and some of your soldiers, like David said, can come out to defend your castle. But other specific types of workers have to go to specific places. And in this game, the player board we broke it up. We're not going to go into in depth and how it's all broken up, but it's broken up to different sections. But the right sheet, just like Hadrian's Wall, is broken down into different factions that you can gain influence with, and then do almost like a bunch of different mini games that are attached to each one of those factions.
Yeah, there's a lot to do on the right-hand page, and a lot of it is very similar feeling to Hadrian's Wall. The part that feels quite a bit different are those mini games that are mostly attached to the entertainment sector.
And some to worship too.
Some to worship as well, but it's really interesting. Everyone does have a unique deck of cards, and these are extraordinarily multi-purpose because depending on which area you're playing around in, a lot of them will have you spend some resources, then you'll get a thing, and then it'll say flip over 2 cards, one after the other, and then you're comparing on these 2 cards the row that's pertinent to the area that you went to. So for instance, if you go to tournaments, you're going to be looking at this middle row here, and you're effectively jousting. It's kind of a rock, paper, scissors sort of situation where, okay, is my lance where his shield is, or does he not have a shield there? I won, so I get a little bonus extra from that. But these mini games down here are really fun, and they all have to do with these cards, which is a nice, I think, addition, because you know that when you're playing down here, it's almost effectively always going to result in flipping over 2 cards and then figuring that out.
And if it has a little bit of that Hadrian's Wall feel, if you remember in Hadrian's Wall, you're kind of looking at what the numbers that other people played to kind of fill in your numbers, and you're looking at the different, shapes that people could do to fill in that little grid. It has that same feeling, but exemplified. I mean, there's 6 different things on these cards that you could be referring to, and each one kind of feels really satisfying. Like this Michael Moss, where you're actually like doing math, and you're like trying to build these math equations, or you're coloring in different flags and trying to get rewards that way. So these mini games do feel really fun.
Yeah.
And they're a nice break from, I think, the heavy-duty strategy that you're having to do in the rest of the game.
Yeah, it is very difficult to sit here with this game in front of us and talk to you about it without like wanting to share every single detail.
There's just so much.
But it would be a very, very long video. There is a lot going on here. You're going to basically do that over what, 5 rounds?
5 rounds, yep.
And these rounds are going to take some time. That's why the game plays simultaneously. If you've never played Hadrian's Wall, once you get all your resources after that draft and whatnot in this game, everyone just spends the resources doing all their things. And some people are going to do that faster, like Ryan, than others, like me. But it's going to take some time to get all that done, because you're going to trigger so many combos. If you've played Hadrian's Wall, or things like Three Sisters or Fleet the Dice game, bigger, deeper, and right games, you're going to see combos galore.
Honestly, I feel like while this is heavier than Hadrian's Wall, they have streamlined quite a bit of it. I think in a way that you can very specifically see, like, okay, well, this area here is where I spend my coins. Like this whole wealth wheel, everything just costs a coin, and you spend your coins there. You're always spending your patrons on the right side of the board. So it does feel like there's a lot going on. If you're just looking at these boards for the first time and you've never played Hadrian's Wall, you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's icon overload.
It's an intimidating looking game.
Right, it is an intimidating looking game, but it's done in such a way that, like, when you check something off, you're either immediately checking off something somewhere else, or you're immediately getting something. And that's really all you're doing.
Right.
So the actual game, it's pretty digestible in that, like, okay, I built this, it gives me production. And that's another thing, I mentioned it earlier. I love the focus on production. You could produce some things at Hadrian's Wall, but literally there's ways to get production for almost every single resource and worker type in this game. So if you're really focusing on that, you could start a turn with just a huge pile of stuff, which is always something I like to do.
And something similar is not quite production, is the investments that you can make sort of in your castle too, because like Ryan touched on, the center here shows a different type of thing you can do from a tactics standpoint. And depending on how many of those you invest in, you can just use wood by itself, not even a person, to create a lot of those things using circles on your sheet, so that when push comes to shove, if you don't have the number of towers or walls that you need, you can always throw rocks at them if the battle that you're fighting will utilize the rocks. Some of them won't, so then you'll be out of luck. So you could diversify there, but it feels like something you're investing in and being able to use over time.
Yeah, and I don't want to end this video without mentioning, I think, the one big draw that might not be for me and David, but is going to be for a lot of you, and that is the solo campaign. Oh, yeah. This game actually comes with a huge campaign booklet that's full of narrative and a different setup for every single game. Now, when you're playing just, 2 to 4 players, you use some scenario cards, and you see that each one of these castles actually comes off. There's a scenario setup that tells you to use like castle 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or whatever. When you're playing the scenario, every page of that solo scenario is going to tell you how to build this row. So you're going to end up with a different game with some different things happening every time you play.
And I will say, I might try it solo. Because I'm generally the guy at the table who's last finishing my turn. So maybe I'll just play at my own speed and play the solo scenario.
Yeah, and there's a lot of solos. Like, it's a whole campaign book too. So you'll get a lot of entertainment out of this one.
Yeah, so that is the Anarchy. If you have any questions at all about it, please make them in the comments below. I know we didn't go into great detail about every little detail that's going on, but there really is a lot to it. But hopefully you took away from this some of the big differences between this and Hadrian's Wall. But like I said, let us know in the comments below if you have any questions. Until next time, though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.